Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us um, for this conversation about AI in enterprise. A special welcome to our new subscribers. And if you are on watching this call and not subscribing, what's wrong with you? There are easy way to do it. I'm sure my colleagues will make that clear to you via the chat. Thank you for being here. Anyway, by being a subscriber, you get exclusive access to monthly insider events, which one of which I'll be pointing you in the direction of later today. Access to our community surveys and our subscriber Slack channel. I want to thank BMO for sponsoring this event. And to kick us off, pass this over to Alex Arjomand, Head of AI and Strategic Business Analytics, North American Personal and Business Banking at BMO.
Thank you so much, Murad. Hi, everyone. As Murad mentioned, my name is Alex Arjomand, and I'm the Head of Artificial Intelligence and Strategic Analytics for North American Personal and Business Banking at BMO, Bank of Montreal. I've really been looking forward to today's session, as it will provide many insights into the development and growth of AI in Canada. Now, from the start, it's important to note that Canada has been at the forefront of AI research for decades and is considered a global leader in the field of AI. Contributions from universities, research hubs, tech startups, and private sector collaborations have set Canada up for success. And when I look at the current landscape of AI in Canada, I see many opportunities for adoption and growth. Earlier this year, the government announced its $2.4 billion investment to secure Canada's AI advantage by accelerating job growth and boosting productivity by helping researchers and businesses develop and adopt AI. Now, with great investment comes great responsibility, but also great reward, as AI offers a significant opportunity to grow the Canadian economy. In fact, according to a recent report from Microsoft, generative AI alone can add up to $180 billion annually to our economy by 2030, largely through labor productivity gains. It's therefore so vital for companies and enterprises to adopt AI into their business models and drive value and increase efficiency. So, as we think about AI implementation, here's what I see as the top three areas of focus. One is data. AI is hungry for data, but not just any data. It's hungry for high quality, up-to-date, and complete data. And this is a fundamental baseline requirement in today's age to ensure meaningful and accurate results from any flavor of AI, whether machine learning or natural language processing, all the way through Gen AI. A second area is integration with existing systems. Now, in order to unlock the full potential of AI, it must integrate into your current technologies, processes, and workflows, be that through delivery to employees' desktops or integration seamlessly into core systems such as digital or CRM. Third, but by no means third in importance, is ensuring ethical usage and appropriate controls for AI. The responsible use of AI requires us to mitigate certain risks, such as data privacy, discrimination, selective amplification of bias, hallucinations, and so much more. And as we look to the future of AI, there's two quite important items to note. One is continued investment and research in AI, and secondly, AI's impact on the workforce. Now, here at BMO, we have been investing in AI for many years, both inside and outside the bank. We invest in technology and AI R&D by sponsoring and partnering with organizations like the Vector Institute, Creative Destruction Labs, and NextAI. And because of this strong investment in technology, BMO is leading the way as a digitally enabled, future-ready bank with many innovative products and services. In fact, these innovations led BMO to win 3 awards, including Most Outstanding Machine Learning Initiative from Digital Banker in late 23. For example, our BMO Cash Track Insight, built in-house leveraging AI and machine learning, helps our customers improve their financial wellness through delivering real-time insights, predicting upcoming cash shortfalls, and ultimately offering a personalized picture of day-to-day spending. And just last month, BMO Insurance announced the launch of our very first generative AI-powered digital assistant, providing insurance advisors with a cutting-edge digital solution to help meet clients' needs. And in the year to come, we see additional assistance to be deployed in this way across the enterprise. Now, our investment does not stop with customers and community. it is critical that we invest in our colleagues to continue building their knowledge and skills around AI and innovation. Because as the AI landscape changes and grows, so too must the workforce. In the next few years, it will be critical to upskill and reskill the current workforce to adapt to new ways of working. In this effort, BMO has invested heavily in skills training through programs and platforms like Pluralsight, which offer training in various insights and areas of technology, including cloud and AI. Now, as we continue at BMO our digital-first journey, we are excited to see the evolution of AI through Canada. We pride ourselves in offering the best products and best experiences to our customers, which we couldn't do without our employees, our culture, and an ongoing commitment to digital and AI excellence. As I wrap things up, I'd like to thank the Logic for having me today. I am so eager to hear the great conversation from the panel today, and I hope everyone leaves learning something new and innovative. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex. So yeah, let's take it away. Alex has described a bunch of different applications of AI within one enterprise organization there within BMO, and that's a spectrum that we're seeing in a lot of different places. Some internal applications, a bit of a slower trend towards external or customer-facing applications. A lot of talk about how quickly things are going from the pilot stage where you're experimenting with something to full-scale production. We're going to get into all of that. So I'd like to have join me up here virtually, I guess, our panelists we are here really to hear from. So Manav Gupta is the Vice President and Chief Technology Officer of IBM Canada, and Jodie Wallis is Global Chief Analytics Officer at Manulife. We're delighted that they're both joining us today to have this conversation. Thank you both for being here. I'm going to start with a quick note for the audience, which is that there's a section in your version of this platform where you could put questions for our panelists. Please use it. I'm sure you have lots of interesting things that you want to know about. Use it through our conversation, and I'll pull stuff up and integrate it into the conversation. Don't feel like you have to wait till the end. We're all friendly enough here, so we'll go that way. So I want to start by grounding this really quickly, because I think for a lot of people, even as much sort of AI coverage as everyone's been reading. Obviously, everyone on this call has been reading the Logic's AI coverage diligently and has not missed a story. But for all of that, examples really help. So maybe I'll start with you, Jodie. Can you give us an example within the Manulife context of an application of artificial intelligence where you're seeing real results today?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me, Murad. First of all, I'll say we've been doing AI at Manulife in a material way since about 2016. Obviously, at the end of 2022, with the arrival of ChatGPT and kind of the era of Gen AI, we've significantly amped up our efforts. So in the realm of traditional or classical AI, we've been using it for fraud detection. We've been using it in the underwriting process and in lead generation, to name a few things. But I'll give you some examples of what we've been doing lately in the Gen AI space. Certainly, we are tackling areas that are often talked about in the media, tackling a lot of contact center cases, in particular, call summarization, key trends identification, and also knowledge bots for our call center agents. We've been leaning in pretty heavily on the sales front. Manulife conducts business primarily in North America and Asia, and we have about 100,000 agents who sell our products in Asia. So we've been leaning in pretty heavily there to provide Gen AI solutions for salespeople so they can quickly assess customer needs and offer them the right product at the right time in a meaningful and relevant way. And that one we've seen quite a bit of impact there. We've seen, versus a control group, about a 12% improvement in conversions between the group that is using the Gen AI enabled sales platform versus the group that isn't. And the other area where there's just tremendous opportunity and where we can get pretty good pretty quick is in automation of things that previously we couldn't automate. And we couldn't automate them because the automation tools just weren't flexible enough, or were too brittle to adapt to our changing environment. So for example, in claims processing, we're now using it to classify and extract data from a whole bunch of types of receipts, use that information against our eligibility criteria, and push those claims payments through in a straight through way.
Yeah, and I think that arc, the insurance companies have been using AI for, I think, a lot longer than most enterprise size businesses. But the arc from sort of like the old school to Gen AI is one we're going to talk more about. Manav, you've got an interesting viewpoint on this because you're both building technology, and IBM is an organization that does like about 600 million things, from what I can tell. What are applications that either you internally or your clients are finding particularly useful?
Thank you, Murad, and hope you guys can hear me okay. And as Jodie said, thanks for having me on. And exactly as you said, at IBM, we are both a AI provider as well as an AI consumer. So maybe I'll start with a little bit of a background on how long IBM has been working with AI, and then I'll get into some of the applications that we are internally using it for. So needless to say, we have a pretty rich history from the very early days, even when the term was coined first in 1956. So in the mid-90s, some of you might remember, there was this rage of expert systems doing various human complex tasks. So we introduced at the time the Deep Blue generation of computers that played and won against the human champions at the time. We followed that up with a number of other advancements within our AI portfolio, including the very famous original Watson that won Jeopardy against the reigning champions at the time in 2011, which seems like a lifetime ago. In parallel, we have done various AI-related engagements on a wide variety of platforms and with clients, both locally as well as globally. When I say locally, I mean Canadian clients. Now, coming back to more recently, about 2 years ago, we took a stance that we wanted to make IBM the most productive company in the world by measuring ourselves against our competitors and really looking at ratios such as employee to revenue ratios. So we are on track. And so as part of that ethos, we decided that we are going to leverage all of our own technology, so both hardware and software, for our own internal use cases first. So sort of testing IBM as the client zero, if I may call it that, and then return some real numbers and real productivity savings to our bottom line. So by end of this year, we are on track to return $3 billion in productivity savings to our bottom line. And we did that through an approach of eliminate what we could, simplify what we cannot, automate the remaining, and then infuse generative AI. As we went through this process, I mean, it wasn't an easy road. We had a couple of false starts to that as well, quite candidly. What was interesting is what we really learned out of that is in order to do that, we need a hybrid cloud that performs at scale, because you cannot always upload all of your data into a single provider, whether it's IBM or anybody else, because the data, by virtue of these legacy organizations that have existed for many number of years, it exists in different silos in different locations. You need a data fabric architecture that allows you to unlock that data regardless of where that data is. You need a robust data model and a governance layer that will allow you to serve that data up in a timely manner. And then finally, you need a culture that allows that growth mindset. So the employees and the constituents are an active participant and early stakeholders into the process. Right. So if I wrap it up, we have seen tremendous savings in use cases such as our HR assistants. And I can get into a lot more detail around that, as well as productivity savings in terms of IT automation, employee workforce management, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I think we're going to talk through some of those examples. I think so. There's two categories of things I want to get into next. I want to talk a little bit about the technology itself and what people are working with, but I also want to talk about, Jodie, you were talking about sort of having a spectrum of projects, particularly on the Gen AI side, and so can you tell me what that means at Manulife and what the spectrum looks like?
Yeah, so we think about it in terms of 4 categories of Gen AI. I'll just talk about Gen AI for a minute. 4 categories of Gen AI solutions. The most basic one is the productivity solutions that a lot of people talk about. So we think that's about 15 to 20% of our benefits will come from that. And I gave the example of claims processing. That would be in that category. The second category is re-looking at our professional workforces. Manav gave the example of technology. So where we can use Gen AI solutions, we happen to use GitHub Copilot for the most part in software development and testing, but also professional workforces like legal, like audit, like compliance, where things like contract management, contract generation can really be augmented using Gen AI. So that's our second category, and that's another 15%. We do think the largest category is in how we enable our sales and distribution forces. We think there is a ton of possibility there. I mentioned our 100,000 agents. Like, the name of the game in many of the markets in which we do business is we need to have more contact with more customers on topics that are relevant to them in the moment. And, we know in a lot of the markets that we serve, people are underinsured. So it's not about just chasing after them to get more insured, but it's really digging in and finding out what are the reasons they're underinsured, by how much are they underinsured, and what would be a meaningful way to start a conversation. So we're having more meaningful conversations with more customers. And then we think there's a category here, like everything I've just talked about, and most of what Manav talked about is, let's do what we're doing today, but do it better. Let's be the most productive player in our industry. We talk about being the most digital, customer-centric player in our industry. That is our ambition, or one of our ambitions. But I think that the most interesting change from Gen AI will be from things we couldn't do before, not making things we do better, but things we couldn't do before. Creating entirely new workforces based on Gen AI that didn't exist before, that help us do things that were frankly just off the table, right? A lot of what we talk about in Gen AI, by the way, we could have done before, but at a cost that was just prohibitive to making the business case work. If you want to use chatbots, is a great example. Chatbots in most industries, certainly in complex B2B industries, don't really work that well because you have to script everything. And there are too many conversations to script. But using Gen AI in interactions just opens the door for things that weren't possible before. Same thing, there's never been a technology or a real productive way to augment research and analysis. And we do a lot of research and a lot of analysis, both on the insurance side of our business and on the asset management side of our business. And so, and by the way, in the regulatory side of our business too. Sure. So that the ability to support research and analysis in a whole new way, that's the last category. And for us, that we think is about 20% of the benefits. And I could just maybe add to one thing, that the thing that's going to get us to that last category is not the things that Alex talked about in his opening. The things that Alex talked about are all important. The data is absolutely important. Integrating is absolutely important. Being responsible is important. Of course, talent's important. But the thing that's going to get us to that category, that fourth category, is imagination. We are really not that imaginative, right? We know how things work. We know how to make them better. But can we imagine a different world, a world in which objectives are just approached in a completely different way? That's hard for us. That's hard as a 150-year-old organization, but I think that's just hard for us as people.
Yeah, and I think one of this gets to a thing that there's like a sort of slightly tilted version of this that I'm hearing a lot when I talk to a lot of like system integrators, so consulting companies that are helping enterprises adopt technology, or even the companies that make large language models and other mostly generative, but also just other AI tools, which is the focus of projects tends to be efficiency. There's been relatively little, Jodie's third category includes some amount of growth, like you're helping to expand sales, but by and large, it seems like most implementation to date has been efficiency focused and not new revenue opportunities, new categories, new markets focused. Is that also what you're seeing across sort of IBM's clients?
I'd say partially. So look, I think it sort of makes sense for all enterprises for testing out this relatively nascent technology. I mean, large language models and the GPTs are only 2 years old in production. And I'll submit to you that even though we are seeing some pockets of adoption, most enterprises are still very early in their journey. And if you really scratch the surface, and not to be too technical, but if you really scratch the surface, most organizations today are still trying to rag their way into production. So they're effectively what they're doing is they're taking their corpus of data, they're creating these vector representations, which sit outside of the LLM. So you have this really large, powerful neural network that powers a large language model. But that general knowledge that this LLM has, because it's been trained on this massive corpus of data, it's really not being used for what it's meant to be. And what's really happening is we are using the LLM in the last mile, which is to present the user a human
Oh, I think
scale
we
itself.
Sorry, Manav, I think we lost you briefly there.
Okay, sorry, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, you were saying using it in the last mile.
Yeah, so we really use RAG only in the last mile. So really to get a human readable answer back to the user.
Right. So just for our audience, the RAG here is retrieval augmented generation. The simplest version of this is the models are trained on the data of the internet, but they may not know anything about your company. How do you get them to understand anything about your specific company using your specific data?
Sure. Yeah. So now back to productivity versus revenue generation. So in every organization, especially I'll say storied organizations that have existed for years and years, there always tends to be a set of complex cognitive tasks that we have built up over a period of time through our processes, through our regulation, and so on. So there always tends to be a rich corpus of data with some humans, the knowledge workers, who know how to do a certain task. So new technology, existing body of problem, existing corpus, that's the real starting point. So let's call that the low-hanging fruit. So most of our clients, including IBM when we started, that's where we started. So productivity gains makes total sense. But when you truly begin to start leveraging the power of these large language models, and you're now getting into, I'll call it the next tier above, which is now you're getting into fine-tuning of these models. So in other words, your enterprise data is not just sitting outside, but now you're doing things to that LLM that you acquired through open source or some other mechanism. You're adding that data into the LLM itself. So now you can have a much more robust answer. And then you can use it for, I'll call it a higher order of function purposes. So we are beginning to see early adopters into that phase. So as an example, we have a Canadian retailer that's looking for potato crop for the new variants of potato crop that they might be testing out with. That's a classic example. Revenue generation, that's key for them. We have another pharmaceutical client that's looking to do protein folding testing as an example, or identification of new molecules. So they have the corpus, they have the expertise, but historically they would have to go and test these things out in the field, but they're able to generate new revenue. And then maybe the more banal and simple ones are where you're using these for new marketing campaign generations. You're using these for customer segmentation or hyper personalization as an example. So we're beginning to see some of that early adopters.
Right. Hey, listen, if Gen AI is getting me CRISPR potato chips, I am not arguing with this. So I want to talk now a little bit about the challenges internally to actually using this stuff, because I think one of the really big things that people have sort of come to realize, and every new technology hits this hurdle, is like it's not really as simple as plugging in a large language models API and away you go. There's technical challenges, there's change management issues, there's workforce challenges, like. So Jodie, in maybe in one or two cases, where have you hit hurdles that maybe you weren't expecting, and how did you get over them?
Yeah, I mean, I like the expression that Manav used. You can't rag your way to success here. If we're talking purely about Gen AI, right, like being in the AI game, there's a lot of risks. There's a lot of hurdles. There's absolutely, the need to educate your own colleagues as well as customers about what this is and what this isn't. But I'll focus just on the very specific Gen AI risks as we see them, or hurdles. And hallucinations and jailbreaks are very real. I think that a lot of people believe you can just grab the API and put out a solution. And the reality is, I think we're only scratching the surface in terms of the types of hallucinations that are possible and how we manage them. And so one of the hurdles is helping people understand how much of an issue that is, what kind of a hurdle that is, and then creating a combination of technical solutions and people-based solutions that come together to solve. Right? We are not going to rag our way out of this. We are not going to purely have technical answers that are going to solve every hallucination problem. So what does the people angle look like? How are we training our employees? And I don't mean our technology employees or data scientists. I mean, how are we training all 40,000 of our employees to understand how to work in this new way, how to question, how to think differently, how to engage with Gen AI in a way that is both productive and safe. And I will tell you on this topic, what we did this year, I mean, I said before, we've been in the AI game for a while. 2016 was when we had like a formally reorged and created our AI organization. But it was only this year in 2024 that we publicly announced our AI principles, because we felt it was very important for our customers and our shareholders to understand how we think about this, how seriously we take the commitment to responsibility, to human agency, to impact on the environment and sustainability, to the need to work with partners that are aligned with our values, and above all, to make sure that everything we do is synchronized with our code of business ethics. So those are a couple of the things that are important to put, and you got to put a lot of effort into them. They don't happen easily, and they don't necessarily make the priority list for leaders, business leaders of the organization. When you say, hey, I'm going to spend a bunch of money on these things,
Right.
can't wait to share with you the outcomes.
Yeah, and I think this, this answers one of the audience questions we got about how organizations are mitigating hallucination risk and inaccuracy. Manav, I want to throw to you another one of these audience questions, which, because you were talking about, making IBM the most productive organization, like that being a goal. And Mark G asked this question: when introducing AI into your process for larger employee audiences, and IBM is a very large company, was there apprehension from the workforce, and how is this change or opportunity communicated in order to deal with that apprehension?
I think it's a great question. So, and I'll touch upon some of the points that Jodie mentioned as well. So early on, when people started playing with GPTs, it became quite clear that we are at the limits of our imagination, right? Ask it a prompt and it'll give you an answer. So sometimes it was a matter of just pure imagination. So what we did early on is, being a technology company, both a provider and a consumer, we wanted to have our employees a first-class citizen and stakeholder into this. So it just so happens that in parallel, we are trying to establish in our organization a growth mindset that we all have to be experimenting with technology, and we all have to be intellectually curious, because without curiosity, you're just going to be stagnating. So as part of that, we ran a number of what we were calling generative AI challenges. Internally, these were called What's the Next challenges. So all 178,000 employees across 150 countries, as an example, they had to participate in a 5-day virtual hackathon. We've done 2 of those now. And even the people at the top of the house who might be pure business owners, like somebody in procurement, somebody in HR, finance, etc., who have zero visibility to any technology, they were all paired with somebody that was a bit more technical. And that allowed people very early on to start playing with this tech. Now, it had a net compounding effect, that because we were using our own tech with our own people. So we learned the kinks of where our technology was failing, and we were able to scale it quite dramatically as well when the demand would be that high. Like, as an example, we were processing 8 terabytes of data for inferencing per hour at one point through these internal challenges, just to give you an idea. So we took that into account. The other thing that we did was, so I'm going to make 2 points here. So about 6-7 years ago, it just so happened I was working on a engagement with one of the Canadian banks where they were struggling with, let's call it, explaining their traditional AI or predictive AI. So this was the time when many banks were using AI into their customer-facing applications, in particular around things such as loan disbursements or making a decision on what mortgage rates to offer, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a real challenge that they had where they wanted to use this tech to make these really meaningful, life-changing decisions in some cases for their customers. But at the same time, they had to justify to the regulators and also to their own ethics team and security team that the AI was compliant, that it was free of any bias, and that they could validate to the regulators that they understood how this technology came to a decision that it did. And I happened to be one of the lead developers from IBM working on it at that point. And we used our Markham lab, so based in Canada, and a huge shout out to that lab, and something that we're really proud of. And we built a technology which allows us to gather key facts about the AI model, as we call it. So let's call it bottom-up monitoring. Everything that went into the lineage and the pipeline and explaining how the model is performing the way it's doing. So the combination of culture change, having employees early on and in the cycle. In fact, what it has done is we now have a backlog of thousands of use cases that our employees themselves want us to implement and scale, because they can see that it's going to free them from mundane tasks. That's the approach that we have taken to making sure that the workforce is part of the decision-making process rather than being sidelined.
Bring them along on the journey. Jodie, just to keep on this train with the audience, this question from Brian B. In using imagination to do new things in new ways, I mean, we've talked a little bit about this, but can you share an early example of a breakthrough or maybe something that you're working on or sort of tweaking in the present?
I think my favorite example is when we switched from kind of traditional fraud detection, which is mostly rule-based, to using graph analytics. And, it took a long time to set up our graphs properly because there's a lot of different connections that we needed to make. But once we had them set up properly, now we're throwing crazy things into the graph. We have one example where so the new way of detecting fraud is not sitting down and saying, well, we think this is a pattern, let's build some AI to find it, or let's build some rules to address it. Now the way we manage fraud is we throw more and more data into this graph and see what pops out. It's a completely new way of doing it, and frankly, I don't think most of our business partners fully understand it yet. But we threw in some traffic data recently into the graph that we use in the US, and we found some anomalies where a person who perhaps shouldn't have been driving was driving because she got a speeding ticket. And that to me is an example of doing something just completely differently. We would never have thought to look for that pattern. And yet, as we just throw more and more data at it, we're able to use AI to do that. We're trying to do the same thing now with Gen AI. I mean, it's early days around AI analysts or AI researchers, right? We follow companies. We invest in companies around the world. Oftentimes when they report, 14 or 15 companies that we follow, that we invest in, will report on the same day or in the same hour. So how can we get an edge over our competition by thinking about a virtual pool of researchers and analysts that are providing insights for us? So if 14 or 15 are reporting overnight, we have the insights, we have what we need before any of our competitors do. Like we think of this as a new workforce. I think that's different than just following the same pattern, but following it more quickly.
Yeah. Can I borrow them for earnings coverage, please?
Yeah.
No, there's probably some conflict of interest there, but it's a fascinating idea. And I think, research is one of those areas that we're seeing more and more.
Oh, and by the way, buying that off the shelf doesn't work, because we have a proprietary set of things we're looking for and types of insights that we want. If we buy it off the shelf from somebody, that's not a competitive advantage. So there's an interesting kind of a lot of people want to sell that kind of equity research, but how then are you different than anybody else that is doing the same thing?
Yeah, and actually that takes me nicely to a thing that I want to make sure we hit, which is the actual technology availability here, the buying off the shelf versus building internally. I think, there's this assumption that enterprise organizations have the capacity to, someone was saying to me on an unrelated topic, yesterday. 18 months ago, everyone thought that they were going to do pre-training. Like everyone thought that they were going to build their own LLM because they had enough data and they were going to and then eventually everyone was like, oh, you need chips and you need like all this money and all this compute, and it actually is not viable. So maybe I'll stick with you, Jodie, start, but I want to get Manav in on this as well. What are you using? Is it all like GPT 4.0 or like how are you doing this?
So first of all, a lot of our strategic technology partners have also, so in addition to the LLM makers, strategic technology partners have already embedded capabilities. So we are looking at them to say, offer it in your enterprise software and we'll use it. For the stuff that is purely LLM based that we want to build, we're using primarily GPT 4.0 right now, but we are exploring. We approach every use case by saying, what is the right model for this use case? We're very sensitive to the costs of compute, not just because it's money, but also because of the impact on the environment. And so every model, every use case we look at, we say, what is the right model here? We use Llama 3.2 now for LLM as judge in a lot of cases. We think it's a good complement to GPT. And now we're working with the University of Waterloo to explore state-based models because we think that has a lot of promise as well. So we've kept an open mind and an open architecture in terms of what specific model. And we're kind of, I would say, evolving our capability in terms of quickly being able to assess use case by use case. I'm going to use this model here and this model here and this model here to achieve the right blend of accuracy and cost.
Yeah, word models are the next thing that I need to get on. Manav, IBM has its own Granite models, but you're also seeing all of this technology across your clients and your use cases. What are you seeing in terms of what technology is getting used?
So for a short period of time, the industry was besotted with one single model to rule them all. And I think we have very quickly concluded that that's not going to be the case, right? Every organization is going to have, much like what Jodie mentioned, it's going to be a multi-model strategy, right? So our entire approach has been that we are going to use, anything that we're developing, we are going to put that in the open source community. So in fact, about 5 weeks ago, we came out with Granite version 3, which is a completely revamped. And I mean, the rate and pace at which this is evolving is insane. So Granite version 2 was trained on about 1 trillion tokens. We're now up to about 10 to 12 trillion strategy. And these models range from language models, programming code language models, to also time series models. So we're now seeing use of these LLMs, or these foundation models rather, for resource optimization problems, as well as geospatial models that we built with NASA, as an example. And IBM Canada uses that. So multi-model strategy. I also think what most organizations are coming to a conclusion really quickly is they also need repeatable ways and a consistent way to unlock the value from their data. So beyond RAG, beyond the retrieval augmented generation. So we think at IBM we've invented a new technique to fine-tune these models repeatedly and taking the guesswork out of the data science community. We call that technique Instruct Lab. We open source that as well, and the whole intention is do it more repeatably, right? And then bring your data into it. What we're also finding is that the old adage that your AI is as good as your data still holds true. So most organizations might have data, but that data tends to exist only in their silos, and then you need some well thought out data strategy and a data model that complements it. So you pull all of that data, then you fine tune it or give it to this LLM. Hopefully it's sitting in a secure site somewhere that you trust. And then you can get on to more higher value work using things such as LLM as a judge and so on. So lots of research happening in that spot as we speak.
Okay, so what I want to do with our last couple of minutes here is give you a minute each to look forward, because we've been talking a lot about what's happening right now, and Jodie's talked about the importance of imagination. So this is the most fun part of every AI interview I do, which is like, who knows what 12 months from now will look like? But in 12 to 18 months, I'll start with you, Manav, for a minute, and then flip it over to Jodie with the last word. What's a trend or something that you're seeing bubbling up that you think is going to be sort of an important thing for enterprises to consider in the next 12 to 18 months?
I think agentic AI is going to be number one, right? So the evolution from thinking about LLMs or small language models to AI that has agency and autonomy that can execute tasks on behalf of a human being as a companion to a human in a cognitive capacity. I think that's going to be one. We'll continue to see multimodal models. So majority of the models today are text to language or text to text. I think multimodal language or multimodal models adopted in the enterprise is going to be key. The third one I think that's going to happen, and I'll stop there, is I think we'll see the rise of quantitative models. So we talked about language and code. There is a new series of models in various states of research around equations representing the real world, whether it's chemistry or physics or any other automata through a series of equations. So that'll continue to happen. And maybe one last one is I think we'll see further expansion of chain of thought. I think we are very early and rudimentary in its adoption within the enterprises today.
Yeah, and for chain of thought, folks just search the letter O and the number 1 on the logic site. Jodie, over to you for the last word. What's
so
the
my
next
top
one?
3 would have been agentic, chain of thought, and I think we're going to see a lot more emphasis on lower consumption models and transition to lower consumption models. I think the curve that we're on in terms of the compute usage going up and up and up as we have more use cases, more interesting models, bigger models, is unsustainable. So I think we'll see a lot of companies focused on that as well.
Well, thank you both so much for doing this with me. It's a huge topic. I feel like I spend a lot of time talking to folks about this right now. I'm sure both of you do within your organization. So it's great for our audience to hear it from folks who are actually doing the work of putting this out. Thank you to our sponsor, BMO, for making this possible. Thank you to the audience for joining us today. If you're not already a subscriber, you can find a link to subscribe in the chat or visit the Logix website. Thank you to the Logix business team who make this possible for me to do. I basically just show up and talk. They do all the real work, and none of it would work without them. Up next, we have an editorial event today at 2 p.m. so that if you're not currently a subscriber, you have an hour and 17 minutes to subscribe before that event. With the Logix executive editor, April Fong, and newsroom reporters who will discuss the potential economic impact of President-elect Donald Trump's proposed 25% tariffs on Canada, which I can tell you have made for a very busy last 48 hours in our newsroom. Also, save the date. We're hosting another event on Monday, December 9th, a virtual event at noon Eastern about national health, hosted by the Logix Ottawa correspondent, David Reevely. Stay tuned for more details about that shortly. Please reach out to Ariel, the Logix Partnerships Manager, for more information on hosting an event with the Logix. And keep your eyes on your inbox for other special events and happenings in the new year. Thank you again to everyone for joining us, to our panelists, and to our audience. Have a great day.